And I used to go around Chris's, and his sister had almost like a mini Ghetto Blaster thing, just like a tape recorder, and we used to just like steal it and just like record like really bad songs when we were like 10 and
amazing.
And there was this venue that we wanted to play that had a bit of a reputation for being, you know, you go there, you might have a great night, you might get in a fight, you might be surrounded by people on all sorts, you know. It was, you know, one of them places where you were on edge as soon as you went there, but it could be brilliant. And he was climbing on these like rafters above the stage and fell straight down onto my electronics. And that was it, show over. We were about 4 songs in. You're not even going to get so much from a Conservative government. It's almost just hammering it nails into a closed door. That's not a phrase. You know what I mean, though.
Today on Upgrade Sounds, I talked to Rou Reynolds, the frontman of Enter Shikari, and we discussed everything. We talked about his musical upbringing, being gifted a trumpet at the age of 7, meeting Chris and Rob and Rory from the band and how they got their start, talking about all the different bands that he decided to found as a teenager and how all of this musical upbringing led him to start Enter Shikari. We talked about Common Dreads and how that was a real turning point for the band. We also discussed the fantastic work that they're doing with Music Venue Trust. This is a great conversation. Welcome to Upgrade Sounds. So I'd like to start asking all my interviewees the same question, and because I think it gives a really good reference point. And my first question is, what is your earliest memory involving music?
Oh, mate, questions that involve memory, I'm usually pretty poor at. No, it's all good. It's probably, well, the first instrument I learned was the trumpet. And so we used to live, like my nan used to live with us, and she used to love like big band jazz. Sure. So like Louis Armstrong was probably my first like hero, or like Glenn Miller as well. And there's like VHS footage of me at some like street parade or something, like where there's big band marches by, and I'm like marching with them with my toy trumpet. So eventually, when I was like, I don't know, 7, 8 maybe, managed to persuade my parents to get me a real trumpet. Yeah, and that's what I started learning, like kind of, yeah, big band style music. I think started learning a bit of classical as well, and then when I hit like 10, 11, 12, I remember Chris, our bassist Chris, got a guitar, and I was like, oh, trumpet's not cool anymore, I want to play guitar. But yeah, no, it was all about the trumpet for me growing up. Yeah,
it's funny you say that about meeting Chris at, you know, age 10, and your previous kind of influences being like Louis Armstrong and stuff. That's a big gap.
Yeah.
You know, connect. So how do you get from there? Is the rest of your family musical? What was that you know that family unit like when it came to music?
No, my dad was a DJ. He DJ'd like predominantly Northern Soul, Motown, that kind of stuff. So that was a big influence as well. To be honest, that's probably, if we're talking just listening to music rather than like actually playing, that will be my first memory, like being in our basement in Scotland, and just rooting through his records and like putting them on and just dancing about. Like basements should be these dingy, scary places, and it kind of was this house that we had up there. But for me, like the basement was just this like beautiful kind of just amalgamation of history, really, and like listening to all these records. And so that was probably my first musical memory. But apart from that, there was no one played anything or sung in my family. My dad certainly can't sing. So I don't really know where, because I was always very interested in music and playing music, and interested in songwriting. You know, I've been writing songs since I was like 9 or something. So I'm not really sure where that came from, to be honest. There's no like direct influence there, but I think just the fact that I was constantly surrounded by music, even if it wasn't like being played by someone, I think that just had its effect.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you meet Chris, and you guys start jamming together, playing together. What happens?
Yeah.
How do we get to, you know, the next steps of, I guess, Enter Shikari? Where does that? What's the journey from Chris started playing guitar?
Yeah.
to where we are?
It's quite a long one. There's all sorts of kind of iterations of what Shikari was to become before that, so me, Chris and Rob actually all went to the same primary school, so we've known each other since we were like 5. And I used to go around Chris's, and his sister had a kind of like almost like a mini Ghetto Blaster thing, just like a tape recorder, and we used to just like steal it and just like record like really bad songs when we were like 10 and
amazing.
His uncle played guitar, so he started getting guitar lessons from his uncle. And then we just started jamming with Rob, who just got a drum kit when he was about 11 or so. And used to do just like the classic thing, just play covers, everything from like Beatles and Queen up to kind of Britpop. By then we were getting like soaked with the whole Britpop thing and into that. So those were the first things we were doing. We started a band with 2 other guys. That was a 5-piece, and that was more kind of indie sort of stuff. And we were about 12, 13.
What was it called?
Oh, we went through a few. Our first band was Bleach with 2 E's.
Okay.
Then we had Elemental. And then when we were a 3-piece, so me, Rob and Chris, were starting to get into punk, starting to get into the local like scene, hardcore, ska, all the kind of alternative world. And the other 2 lads in the band weren't really into that. And there was this venue that we wanted to play that had a bit of a reputation for being, you go there, you might have a great night, you might get in a fight, you might be surrounded by people on all sorts, It was one of them places where you were on edge as soon as you went there, but it could be brilliant. And so after our band practice, when we were a 5-piece, 3 of us started hanging behind after the other 2 left, and we like started making a different band basically, and sort of slowly edging them out. We're still friends with those guys now,
of course.
But yeah, and that was hybrid with 2 Ys, and so that was more. For a while, we basically sounded like Muse. It was very like a bit operatic, like progressive experimental rock. Really started getting into electronics. Then we had a phase where we were just out and out like hardcore punk. And then Rory joined when we were about 17, and that's when we changed the name to Enter Shikari. Yeah, it's just a long road. Yeah, with many meanders, but yeah.
Oh, of course, and I feel like one of the phrases I think is synonymous with Enter Shikari is hard work. I feel like you guys have really worked hard to build an empire, a fan base. Like a really strong unit. At being 17, in the band, I guess the 4 of you kind of knew this is what we want to do. Was there a set out game plan, or was it just we're just going to play as much as possible? We want everybody to hear exactly what we're about.
Yeah, very much the latter, really. I usually joke that like Shikari was basically a hobby that got out of hand.
Right.
That really was what it was. Look, me, Chris, and Rob we had this like weekly routine sort of thing where I think it was 3, maybe even at one point 4 days a week. We'd walk home from school, and then where we lived next to a much posher like boys like private school, and we'd clean that would be our job. So we'd do an hour there like cleaning a couple of classrooms, and then we go to practice. So like even at that age when you're like rehearsing 3-4 times a week, that was like putting in the graft, like honing our sound. And that's usually like the one piece of advice as well that I try and give to like younger musicians and stuff, like finding like who you are, finding your sound, and like really putting the work in to start with, because you only get one chance to make that first impression. Sure. And I think we failed at that. Like our first iterations of what Shikari was like, it was much more like a loose cannon sort of thing. It was just wilder, and like the music wasn't like honed. There's a few like early, live recordings and EPs and stuff, and it was just manic. I think there was a lot of like, even a few years on from like after touring, there was a lot of almost frustration because no one in the kind of like, none of the labels were interested. We didn't really get much of a look in outside of like the smaller venues that we were sort of booking and stuff. So a lot of the shows we just approached with like a very like, we don't give a fuck attitude.
Right, yeah.
And it was just, you know, got into some stupid situations. But yeah, it was a very intense time, very exciting time.
Yeah.
But there was never any like, we're going to be like a band, we're going to be a big band. Like we enjoyed what we were doing. We loved making music. I mean, you know, we even went to like uni for a year because we thought this, you know, don't be silly. Like, you know, who makes it? Like, who makes being able to be a band their job, you know, the main thing they do in life? So there was never really, I don't know whether it's like the sort of small town syndrome or like a kind of, you know, both my mum and dad's families are like big, like, well, my mum's family is like a big Catholic working class family, and same with my dad. So they're, you know, you sort of have this instilled in you that like, don't shoot up there. You're not going to get there. Don't be stupid. You get sort of battered down. So yeah, there was never that kind of zest for that kind of thing because we just assumed it wouldn't happen. And it was only as it started happening, we were like, fucking hell, we better make a go of this.
There's two questions I want to ask off the back of that. The first one being, what was the first song that you wrote that you guys decided, okay, that sounds like Enter Shikari, that sounds like what we want to sound like? And also, what was the turning point where you knew, okay, we can actually make a career of this now? You know?
That first one. I'm trying to think back through the EPs and stuff, whether there was ever anything on there. I think we did a 2-track EP with a producer called Mark Williams way back in the day, and I think that was Anything Can Happen in the Next Half Hour. And that might be the first one. There's probably earlier ones where I was like, this is getting close to something that we feel is like truly us. But you know, for a long time I was like finding my voice in a very literal sense as well, because I had, when we recorded our first album, I had nodules, like really bad. You know, I wasn't taught technique of how to like shout properly or anything like that. Still haven't been. It was just a process of trial and error, really. You know, so when you're in that position, you're obviously just kind of looking at what other people are doing and trying to like do your best to emulate that. And sometimes it doesn't suit your voice. So there was a long period of like working out what my voice was, working out what our sound was. And, you know, because of my upbringing and sort of being spoilt with all these genres that I was brought up with as well, finding our sound was quite difficult because I wanted to play everything. I still do, you know, I'm so like, the whole musical spectrum excites me. I just see it as like this beautiful thing to explore. So yeah, finding the sound was tough, but I'd probably say Sorry Not a Winner as well. You know, like that was, in terms of songwriting, that was like a proper, almost pop structure. You know, whereas a lot of our earlier stuff was either through composed, like it didn't even have a repeating chorus, or it was just much less immediate as a song. So.
Did you know that was going to be what it was when you recorded that? Like, did you expect
not a clue.
Yeah.
No, we, it was the first version of it was a B-side to a track called Okay Time for Plan B, which we loved. That Plan B was like, that was the live track. That was the one we closed our set with. That was the, you know, mayhem ensued when we used to play that. Sorry Not was like kind of this fun track, up and coming track.
Yeah.
But, It'd been around for a while because I can remember when Rory joined, it was already a riff. I actually have this real kind of wonderful memory really of Rory's first rehearsal with us teaching him the riff. So it's been around since we were like 16. But yeah. So I would say that one or Anything Can Happen were the kind of the first tracks that were like, this feels like something different. Like we're onto something.
So Sorry or Not was my first exposure to Enter Shikari. You know, I think I was about 11 or 12 at the time. So seeing that video, I saw the video on YouTube, and I want to talk about the video because it was so simple, but it was also like nothing I'd ever seen. Like all these kids going crazy whilst you lot played a bit. Was that what your early shows were like? Is that like literally peering into a window of, you know, what your shows were like at that point? Or is
I mean, even to the point of it being not particularly organised, it being not... I mean, basically, this was shot in Chris's parents' front room whilst they were away. They'd had no clue. The only reason they found out was because there was a big chipped section of the ceiling where Rory's guitar had gone up and taken a chunk out of the roof. So, and that was, you know, we did a lot of that kind of stuff. I remember playing... there was this abandoned milk dairy near us that we used to just like break into, and for some reason it still had power, so we didn't even need a Jenny. We did play a few kind of rogue shows outdoors with Jennies, but you know, we were influenced by the Prodigy and like that whole scene, like KLF, you know, just like putting on legal raves essentially, and that inspired us, and also slightly by like American hardcore, and you know, the real like creating a community, and the show being not this like organized thing, but you know, you go to like a proper venue and try and play. And as well, like a lot of the venues near us were 18 plus, so we had to do this kind of thing. It was like a necessity really. But yeah, they were always mental. You know, the amount of shows that didn't even finish because something happened. You know, yeah, they were good times.
Oh man, just pure anarchy, right?
Yeah. I remember shows where, well, the first one comes to mind is Rob used to come out from behind his kit at some points and Rob is a born front man. He should be the front man of this band. I'm not. I still like struggle sometimes with it. And he used to come out from behind his kit whilst I was doing like little interludes, like little breakbeat things. And there was one, I think it was either like Lincoln or Scunthorpe, or you know, one of these places that we used to play, and he was climbing on these like rafters above the stage and fell straight down onto my electronics, and that was it. Show over. We were about 4 songs in, so there's stuff like that happened that was awful. Stuff like, you know, the crowd just getting too rowdy and like speakers falling over and breaking, and there was a lot of that kind of stuff. As well, we used to play any show, you know, we'd get offered, or like try and get on any bill, and there were bills we shouldn't have been on, you know, like crowds that didn't understand us, other bands that didn't understand us, and often people would hate it, you know, like real vehement reactions. So there's a lot of shows that ended in nastiness. I think the metal scene especially, like for me, I've always compartmentalized alternative world, but metal and hardcore are like very different things for me. I know like now it's all a beautiful mash, but back then, you know, we'd get a lot of purists who like hated us, whereas in hardcore world, I don't know whether it was because Refused had sort of opened doors to like electronics and everything. We were much more like accepted and sort of celebrated, which was wonderful. But yeah, we'd had a lot of like metal kids who really passionately hated us. So yeah, you never knew what you were gonna come up against when you played a show as Enter Shikari.
What would you have done differently looking back on your career up until this point?
That's always a tough one, like, because every like mistake, you know, like we learnt something from, and would have that lesson been as instilled if we didn't make that mistake? You know, there's like that whole philosophical side to it. You know, our song off the last album, It Hurts, is kind of all about that, like embracing failure, embracing mistakes, and trying to ease people's like psychology around failure. You know, the fear of failing is like such a big thing. So yeah, I'm not sure what we would have changed. I would love to have instilled a bit more confidence in myself, like, because everything we did, it may seem like we were, you know, like pioneering like a niche little bit of the musical spectrum and doing things differently, but every step was taken with a lot of trepidation. We didn't know if we were like allowed to be doing this, and especially when we came up against like a lot of backlash. It was just like, when you're a kid, you look up to sort of your elders in the scene, and if people think you're shit, you start to think, you question everything you're doing, Right. So I would love to have instilled some more confidence, so I could just be a bit more at ease with what we were doing, and a bit more sort of free flowing, rather than like thinking over everything 1,000 times. Should we be doing this? Is this right? So that's definitely something I would have liked to have changed. But yeah, other than that, like even things like our second album, we went with a major in the US, in Interscope, in Warner's, and
so this is Common Dreads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily sure whether that was the right thing to do, but the amount we learnt from it was priceless, really. We got so much knowledge from that. And it's not, we were lucky as well. It's not like we were one of these bands that got picked up and then just dropped,
right.
A few 6 months later, which was happening a lot. Happened to a lot of our peers at the time. The only reason we went with it is because the people that signed us there, we knew actually did get it and
Right.
knew were passionate. But the problem was the revolving doors of the industry, that those people left within a year. So we were like, oh, now we're here with a label where we're a very small fish in a big pond, and these people don't really understand what we're trying to do, and had to kind of weasel our way out of that. But yeah, we learned so much. So yeah, even those things that I would like to have done differently, just to see what paths those would have led us down, we still got a lot out of it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you talk about major labels and how they can like act as that revolving door, do you think it's important for bands like yourselves, or even bands on the come up, to have allies in those rooms, even if they're not signed with them? Do you think that's an important part of being a musician?
Yeah, I mean, take any allies you can get. You never know. The kind of mindset that we used to play in was you never know who's in the audience.
Sure.
And I don't mean that in a sort of like, if you're not someone in the industry, it doesn't matter. But it's just like, we were already playing the kind of cliche of play every show like it's your last. That was definitely something we were doing. But yeah, you never knew in those days who was sort of standing at the back with their arms folded going, okay, this is interesting. And yeah, kind of, taking on and befriending anyone that understands your music can be amazing, because it's hard to find as well, because still a lot of people in the kind of the bigger parts of the industry, it was much more rife when we were coming up, and I think now, like, you do find genuine people that love music and all styles of music. Like, things have come on leaps and bounds in the last 20 years. Like, back then it was all much more separated, whereas now you scroll through most people's playlists and there's all sorts of music in there. So there's a lot more like music lovers in the industry than people who just like see a band and think, oh, I can turn them into something and make a pretty penny. So yeah, I think making connections and taking every kind of friendship you can get is important, because it can be a very cutthroat industry.
Speaking of friendships, you probably befriended I think he's a real mastermind when it comes to music, Jason Butler from Fever. He's on your new song, and I guess, what do you look for when you look for collaborators? Because the two that really stand out to me one is Jason, and the other is Crossfaith, Kentikoi. Two, very smart musicians, I think, in what they're building, and like Crossfaith, you look at the branding, the symbol, things like that, kind of like your own, like in terms of how they, like, I guess I like to use the phrase world building. And then you look at Jason, someone who's like, very anarchistic. He believes in. He has such strong beliefs, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. What do you look for when you pick your collaborators?
A lot of times I'm not actually like rationally picking them. They just seem to like appear in my mind on the track that I'm working on. So like that was certainly the case with Losing My Grip. I was writing that and I could like already hear Jason. I was just like, okay, because we've known each other for so long. We toured with Let Live back in the day so much, and I think it was always sort of a thing that was on our minds, like we should do something together at some point. There's not a lot of artists out there who we feel very like akin with, and Jason's certainly one of them. And so I sent that to him straight away. That was almost like it was the music demanded his presence, and I guess to just expand on that, it's because like that song has so many influences within it. It has very clear like drum and bass, jungle, grime, hip hop influences, and it has punk, hardcore, metal. And still to find people that straddle both those worlds really well and like fucking nail it is quite hard, and Jason is one of those people. It demanded it. Crossfade, that was great because they just came to me with the track, and I just loved it. And we've got to tour with them quite a few times over the years as well, and they're so much fun. Like so full of just like, it's not just aggression. There's like a joyful energy there. It's just like really nice to be around. So that was an honor to be on that track. Yeah.
Just before I let you go, I need to talk about the fantastic work that you're doing with Music Venue Trust on this tour.
Oh, yeah.
Grassroots venues are obviously clearly very important to Enter Shikari because of how you guys got your start. I just wanted you to touch on, the continued support that you give for smaller venues around the country.
Yeah, well, the last few years have seen like a real acceleration of music venues either immensely struggling economically or completely shutting down. And obviously within capitalism, there's always a kind of coercion, a sort of pushing for the use of a building to be the most profitable use. And often that's not something that's involved in arts or culture or entertainment. It's like another fucking block of luxury flats, So for us, it's like, it's all about, as you say, like supporting these places that helped us hone our craft, helped us make lifelong friendships, helped us completely open our minds. These aren't places that are just like music venues. They're like home to people. And especially like in this kind of really toxic, like divisive culture that our government is pushing us into at the moment, for like alternative kids, for like the LGBTQ community, for like anyone that feels that they don't have a place in society. These places are just like a heaven sent, So yeah, like for us, the main thing is trying to put pressure on not just like the government, because you're only going to get so much from a conservative government. It's almost just hammering it nails into a closed door. That's not a phrase. You know what I mean, though. But like putting pressure on the bigger venues, because I think that is a really reachable target, like for arenas, for warehouses like Victoria Warehouse where we're playing today, for the bigger venues to support the real grassroots venues. That is a real achievable goal. But still, of course, when you've got your big like O2 arenas and things like that, there's going to be some reticence, some holding back about wanting to give some of their, ticket money to smaller venues. And so they've been saying, no, we can't do this. There's too much, the complexity of how that would work and how we would route the money to all these excuses. So we were like, no, it's as easy as this, and so we're just giving £1 of every ticket to the Music Venues Trust. And it kind of wipes out all of their arguments. And so we've shown that it is completely achievable. There is a bit of like organisation involved, of course, but it's doable. And hopefully that will start the ball rolling, and we can get like other bands involved in like just putting pressure on the bigger sort of more corporate venues that, let's not be around the bush. Like, they're not struggling. There's another, I think it's 15 arenas in the UK that are in planning proposals or are being started to be built at the moment. So the arena sort of industry is doing fine, it's expanding, but who's going to fill those arenas in the future if the young artists aren't coming up through playing those venues, honing their craft, making their connections, getting the experience? So for me, it's like, it's a very logical thing. You cannot keep building like beautiful big arenas if you've got nothing beneath it that's providing the groundwork and the foundations for new artists.
I think what you guys are doing is great, and I think you're spot on in terms of, it's almost counterproductive to build massive arenas and then not have anybody coming through to play it. I want to let you go, but before I do, you're already about 20 years deep into your career, with Enter Shikari.
Nuts.
What does the next 20 years look like?
Who knows, man? We so rarely think about the future. Like, especially at the moment, my mind is very much just like on tonight. But like, we feel just like very lucky, very grateful for like what we've built up. I think we've always said, as long as we keep grounded in what we've built, like, and we feel like we're still creating and upholding a community, that's sort of all that matters. I'm sure things will continue to change, the music will continue to change, but for instance, the last album, there was probably more excitement writing that last album than there was our first. Purely because the excitement is bolstered by gratitude, because we never thought we'd be writing a 7th album, So just like that thrill to write music and to explore music is still completely there, still completely real. If that ever fades, we're done. But at the moment it hasn't, and it's showing no sign of it. So that's all that matters, like being able to explore music. Like I'm very aware that we've been given this very long leash. Sure. A lot of audiences want the same album again and again for bands. And that's completely understandable. People want nostalgia, they want comfort, they want what they know. We've rarely given our audience that. And yet they've stuck with us. So for me, that it makes me like feel so connected, so grateful for our supporters. As long as that remains the same, I'll happily keep exploring music.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.